So I'd like to share with people a particular documentary series that I found very interesting and very enlightening because I have had a pretty significant past with musical education, if you want to call it that. I was into a lot of different bands, and I've had just a lot of different experiences with a lot of different types of music. And I'm somewhat of a musician myself, play different instruments, and I find that this particular series, and it's called, I'll show you in a second, Hell's Bells. Right, it's been around for a long time. I think it came out maybe in the 90s. I'm not sure, maybe early 2000, or maybe in the 90s. And that was the original version of it. So this is the second version, which I guess is really more of an updated version of the original, taking the same type of approach that the original did to analyze music in all its different aspects and all the different influences that go into the music. And it's really all different kinds of music. I mean, everything from bebop jazz to early rock and roll with Elvis Presley, and then leading into the '60s and disco and techno and '80s new wave bands and satanic rock and roll and heavy metal and really any different type of music, blues and modern music or new age type music or whatever different genre is being represented in the documentary. It's really on point. I was really surprised because it also references a lot of musicians and artists that you normally don't hear about. So when, as being as thorough as it was and educated as it was a lot more informative than just somebody saying all music is satanic, which is one approach, or all rock and roll music is satanic, or why is it satanic? People want more, and I was one of those people. I really get caught up in all these different musical traditions or movements or a lot of different styles, or punk or new wave, or I don't know, whatever it was, psychedelic music or anything from the '60s era, or blues or jazz or whatever I was into at the time, or world music. I didn't realize a lot of times that the amount of influences and how influenced I was by the music. I mean, I was so completely affected. I mean, it really, never, I don't know of any other form of art, some means of communication or vehicle or for artistic expression, an artistic medium that's more powerful than music. It really, because it hits you in these you know archetypical centers, if you want to call it that, these places that you can't express in words, emotions that, and depending on what type of music it is, it might hit you in other ways. Have a kind of magical impact on you, or some alchemical impact on you, and and induce ecstasy in your body and in your mind, and it ties in with mysticism. And if you have any experience with drugs and the music combined, all these different components mixed together is this cauldron of you know of just pure supernatural phenomena, if you want to call it that. I mean, music is very, very powerful. People become possessed through music, through chanting or trance-inducing type music, or just the raw energy that is music. A lot of artists and musicians have become possessed on stage in the process of playing certain types of music, or just from the experience of playing music, or you're dancing and people get possessed by the music. It's a very powerful thing. And then if you think there's malevolent entities in the mix, then it could have a pretty severe impact on the individual. They may become possessed, and they may not even realize they're possessed. And it affects your mind, and it affects the way you think about the world, and it affects how you how your opinions are developed about certain things. And if you're like myself, I mean, it was very akin to this whole liberal mentality, and it came a lot through the music that I was listening to. This whole kind of maybe psychedelic perspective of things in the '60s countercultural revolution type mentality. It was, and a lot of it came through the music. Then with the musicians, there's all these literary influences, the poets and the writers, and all that affecting the individuals, like the cover of like Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band album cover, that all those different influences on them specifically, all these different religious figures, swamis, gurus, and occultists like Aleister Crowley's on the cover of that album, and people like Bob Dylan and Edgar Allan Poe and Dylan Thomas and all these other influences that affected the Beatles and how they thought, and ultimately affected their lyrics. I mean, music is very personal. It really gets underneath people's skin, exponentially speaking. So it's a very powerful medium, and again, if it's a malevolent entity that's trying to influence individuals, the best way, in my opinion, is through music. But that I don't think that's a good thing, but that's the most powerful way to get people hooked and get people brought into the dark side, the other side, break on through to the other side, or whatever you want to call it. But this world of mysticism and entities and elementals and portals to hell can be open through the ritual of music. I mean, it's undoubted. I mean, it's not, you can't, it's undeniable. Cannot deny the reality of the power of music. So I just find this documentary very interesting, and this is just a part of it. There's like 8 different sections, and you can just go online. I mean, I just found this on YouTube, but this goes into like the occult history of rock. We're getting into the influences of the musicians. Who did they look to in the past? Did they look to Aleister Crowley? Obviously Jimmy Page from Led Zeppelin was definitely influenced by Crowley. I mean, he bought his um Loch Ness mansion there at one point. So anyway, I want to share some clips of this. So I just found it very interesting, and it is very, very well done. So that these people that made this know what they're talking about, and that's a huge thing. It's not like everybody's satanic. I mean, I've been influenced for so long by so many different kinds of music that it's nice to see it objectively pulled back. Say, wow, I mean, this person was influenced by voodoo over here, like Jimi Hendrix, and all these other people are influenced, and like Jim Morrison was interested in mind control and the psychology of the masses, and Nietzsche, and ultimately like Aleister Crowley. So that all went into his music, and I feel he definitely was possessed at times. He was definitely on psychedelics, that's for sure, in concert, and you open yourself up when you're on things like psychedelics. So anyway, I wanted to show people some parts of this that I found fascinating. So
psychedelics have done a great job of opening the cerebral cortex and sweeping it clean of many of the game structures of Western society. But if we are going to break set and blow through the check valve of 2,000 years of Christian brainwashing, we need to pay more attention to guides and talismans developed by ancient pre-Christian religions. For example, this symbol was used by shamans going all the way back to the Aztecs and beyond. It's particularly incredible when you consider how closely it resembles
the DNA helix, which provides powerful support for McKenna's theories about tertiary alkaloids like psilocybin, or, if you like, magic mushrooms, providing the spark that fueled the sudden evolution of human consciousness. Now, your reading assignment for the rest of the semester, which I would highly recommend anyway, is generally considered to be the definitive work on the whole topic of using hallucinogens to reprogram the biocomputer that is the human brain.
Hey, Jeremy, man, is this the book you've been talking about, bro? Or what? That book rocks. Dude, that will blow your mind. About my second time through it, I got this idea for a new song, kind of like a journey to the center of your mind type of trip. And I was thinking we could take some quotes from Leary's translation of the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Here's what I got so far.
Like the proverbial frog in the pot, happy to stay put and ethnicity. As a musical form, it's identified not so much by its primary emphasis on rhythm as by the use of these rhythms, coupled with repetition and the relative simplicity of the music to induce a form of trance state.
Or maybe those are like Western African.
Purposely uses these states of altered consciousness, often enhanced by the use of drugs, to dissolve inhibitions and tap into primal energies, heighten sensuality, boldness, resistance to physical and psychic pain, and
the Lord with prayer.
After deconstructing both Christianity and Western culture, he wonders what should take its place.
Was making music to plug yourself into the vibrations of the planet, harmonize your inner vibration with the vibration of the audience, the human beings vibrating in harmony together. It's like a pagan, it's like some sort of a mystical Christ. The release of Kundalini, the Kundalini power expanding in your body and curling and coiling upwards. The Aquarian age in which we'll finally begin to merge all the religions and sciences and arts and whatnot, and we'll all realize that we are gods. Jim Morrison was a god to himself. I'm a god unto myself. We are all gods unto ourselves. So to put it outside of yourself is seeking, is a false messiah. That's a messianic. That's the end of 2,000 years of the culture and the religion that we're involved in now.
The LSD trip. I salute the God within. There's a religious pilgrimage. The LSD kick. I salute the goddess within you. It's a religious ecstasy.
Following a very similar tack was the grand old man of the psychedelic 60s, Timothy Leary. Psychologist, Harvard professor, and consummate free thinker, Leary coined what may have been the essential mantra of the rock and roll revolution.
Turn on, tune in, and drop out. We're turned on, and we're tuned in, and we're very dropped out. Turn on, tune in, and drop out. Turn on, tune in.
Speaking of the psychedelic bands that dotted the 60s landscape, groups that increasingly embraced his occult views, Leary declared, "I rejoice to see our culture being taken over by joyful young messiahs who dispel our fears and charm us back into the pagan dance of harmony." In an essay Leary wrote at the time, he actually spoke of God becoming incarnate in a particular band. He or she, he said, has come back as The four-sided Mandela, the Beatles, the means by which to spread the new gospel, music, the sacrament, drugs. And in what became the virtual model for our opening vignette, John Lennon became so enamored with Leary's thought and practice, he used this song and, a year later, the groundbreaking Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band album. Leary once again extolled the power of music to effect social change by sparking a form of religious awakening. First, Leary said, you started with rock and roll, and then you add psychedelic drugs. Millions of kids turned on pharmacologically, listening to stoned-out electronic music designed specifically for the suggestible, psychedelicized nervous system by stoned-out, long-haired minstrels. This combination of electrical pharmacological expansion is the most powerful brainwashing device our planet has ever known, an instrument for evangelic education, propaganda that few people over the age of 30 can comprehend. They're laying down a new revelation, the journey to the East. And the East is precisely where the brainwashed multitudes found themselves. The Beatles, the Stones, and the Beach Boys, among many other rock stars, followed the same trajectory described by George Harrison. When I was younger, with the after effects of the LSD that opened something up inside me in 1966, a flood of other thoughts came into my head which led me to the yogis. Having embraced Krishna consciousness, Harrison purposely used his music, as Leary described it, for evangelic education of a man-made utopia. You'd think he'd invented the backbeat. The Beatles featured him, along with Aldous Huxley and four Hindu masters, snapshots of some of the more crucial collusions between rock and the satanic. We'll see that David Bowie was more right than probably he ever imagined when he stated, "Rock has always been the devil's music. I believe that it's dangerous. It could well bring about a very evil feeling in the West, a dark era. I feel that we're only heralding something even darker than ourselves." It's been well said that a person is known by the company he or she keeps. Well, in the world of rock and roll, there's one guy who pops up so often, you'd think he'd invented the backbeat. The Beatles featured him, along with Aldous Huxley and four Hindu masters, on the cover of their Sgt. Pepper's album. The photo montage was made up of what they called people we like and admire, and our heroes. Their choice was a significant one. Aleister Crowley is generally considered to be the most important and influential occultist of the 20th century. Clever, well-educated, and a prolific writer, Crowley was a walking encyclopedia of occult thought and practice. Dubbed the wickedest man in the world by the British press, Crowley preferred his own pseudonym, the Great Beast 666. In August of 1914, the World magazine published an account of some of the semi-public ceremonies Crowley held in London. Journalist Harry Kemp attended one such ritual and noted, "Then came the slow, monotonous chant of the high priest. There is no good, evil is good. All hail, Prince of the world, to whom even God himself has given dominion." Kemp continued, sounding for all the world like he was describing any number of contemporary rock concerts. Men and women danced about, leaping and swaying to the whining of infernal and discordant music. They sang obscene words. Women tore their bodices, some partially disrobed. One fair worshiper, seizing upon the high priest's dagger, wounded herself in the breasts. At this, all seemed to go madder than ever. Such was Crowley's ministry at the age of 39. By the time he died 33 years later, fearful, sobbing, and with the last words, "I am perplexed," upon his lips, his dark legacy had reached sufficient critical mass to almost single-handedly, in the words of occult writer Robert Anton Wilson, spark a worldwide revival of paganism.
Well, in 1918, Crowley took a great magical oath, which was a serious thing for Crowley. And he took an oath that he would surrender all of his magical powers that he had achieved until that date to concentrate his energy single-pointedly on the one task of destroying Christianity and reviving paganism. And I think if you look around the world, it's pretty obvious that Crowley has been a remarkable success. Paganism has made a big comeback in an organized way, neo-pagan groups, and in an unorganized way, our whole society has become more pagan.
I'll tell you, when I was a kid, I read Robert Anton Wilson and all this shit, and here we are, we're standing here, we're talking about this shit, and it's real. If you do these things that you're told by Aleister Crowley, if you actually do what they say, things happen. Things occur exactly as it's described, and we can all do it.
In 1971, Timothy Leary had an epiphany during a tarot reading that utilized a set of cards designed by Crowley. His revelation? That he was Crowley reborn and was to complete the work Crowley began, preparing humanity for cosmic consciousness. Leary acknowledged this powerful connection with the great beast in a letter to Wilson, observing that the coincidences, synchronicities between my life and his are embarrassing. From this connection flowed frequent references to Crowley, his philosophy, and their common destinies in Leary's writings and speech.
Well, I've been an admirer of Aleister Crowley. I think that I'm carrying on much of the work that he started over 100 years ago, and I think the 60s themselves. You know, Crowley said he was in favor of finding your own self and do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law under love. It was a very powerful statement. I'm sorry he isn't around now to appreciate the glories that he started.
The phrase, "do what thou wilt," was taken from the Book of the Law, Crowley's most renowned work and one whose composition is worth understanding in the context of our study. While visiting Egypt in 1904, Crowley's first wife, Rose, began going into spontaneous trances, muttering things like, "They are waiting for you," and "He who was waiting was Horus." Intrigued, Crowley and Rose went to visit the Cairo Museum. From a distance she spied a glass case and exclaimed, there he is." Upon inspection, the case did contain an image of Horus painted on a wooden stele, but what particularly stunned Crowley was its exhibit number, 666, his number, the number of the beast. Convinced now that something supernatural was happening, Crowley went back to his hotel and performed a ritual, summoning this higher power. Over 3 successive days, beginning on April 8th, the book was channeled through Crowley while in a trance. And the content of this revelation? "I am the snake that giveth knowledge," the Spirit said. "To worship me take wine and strange drugs, whereof I will tell my prophet." Falling on precisely the wrong side of the Bible's account concerning the fall of man and Satan's role, this snake spirit begins the revelation by telling man that he is a god, that reality is essentially an illusion, sin a myth, and that ethically there's no greater commandment than the law of Thelema, Greek for will, as famously stated in the 40th verse of chapter 1.
Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law.
We do what we want to do when we want to do it.
Well, today that same law has been written, spoken, or sung about by more contemporary artists than even Robert Anton Wilson would have imagined. John Lennon, Jim Morrison, the Black Crowes' Chris Robinson, and Marilyn Manson have all trotted it out in one form or another as words to live by. Harry Smith inserted it into the original handbook that came with his renowned anthology of American folk music. It shows up in songs by Mudvayne, David Bowie, The Only Ones, The Electric Hellfire Club, Alphaville, Throbbing Gristle, Numb, Ancient Ceremony, Eddie and the Hot Rods, Death SS, Theater of Tragedy, Cult Disciples, Therion, Psychic TV, Celtic Frost, Bruce Dickinson, Moonspell, Graham Bond, Sepultura, Edge of Sanity, The Lords of the New Church, and Marilyn Manson, among others. The band 311 not only uses Crowley's Law as a lyric, the bass player had it tattooed on his leg, as well as Crowley's Tree of Life design on his back. Punk band Unwritten Law had Crowley's Law written on their concert t-shirts.
I'm closer to the golden dawn, immersed in Crowley's uniform of imagery.
Among rock artists who have studied and embraced aspects of Crowley's magical system, Daryl Hall, Sting, Coil, and Killing Joke, among many others, could relate at some point in their careers to Bowie's comment, "My overriding interest was in Kabbalah and Crowleyism, the whole dark and rather fearsome netherworld of the wrong side of the brain." Director Donald Cammell, the man behind the underground film Performance, used to enjoy telling friends that, as a child, he would sometimes be bounced on the knee of the wickedest man in the world. Significantly, the film starred the Stones' Mick Jagger and Anita Pallenberg, herself a devoted occultist, and explored nihilism and insanity through the metaphor of rock and roll.
The only performance that makes it, that really makes it, that makes it all the way, is the one that achieves madness, right?
Cammell also played the role of Osiris in Lucifer Rising, the film by another Crowley devotee, Kenneth Anger. Anger directed and produced a number of occult films that utilized the talents of rockers Marian Faithfull, Mick Jagger, Jimmy Page, and Bobby Beausoleil, another Crowleyite who was later convicted of murder in relation to the Manson cult. And Led Zeppelin's Jimmy Page's fascination with the great beast is so notorious, it rates its own link on a website dedicated to Crowleyana. From studying magic as an adolescent, purchasing Crowley's old house, buying an occult bookstore and naming it after a periodical Crowley published, inscribing Do What Thou Wilt onto the runoff vinyl for the first pressing of Led Zeppelin III, even acting out rituals on stage that look an awful lot like those described by the Beast in his, quote, instructions to his magical order. Page meant it when he said, "I've employed his system in my own day-to-day life." While few artists have shown the same level of dedication to Crowley's life and philosophy as Page or the members of Coil or any number of satanic metal bands,